My name is Isabella, and I've seen 55 winters. For most of my life, I've walked just slightly ahead of time's pace. Always the youngest mother at the school gate, still turning heads long after others stopped trying. I wore my years like a soft scarf, seasoned but never burdensome. That was who I was, and I was at peace with it. Until half a year ago, when my husband passed and the world seemed to dim. We had been partners for more than 30 years. He was 12 years older, wise, gentle, my steady lighthouse. When he was gone, he took with him a piece of me I didn't know was removable. The house turned still, its corners echoing with a silence that only exists when laughter used to live there. Grief isn't always dramatic. Often it's in the way you brew a single cup of tea. The way you fold a towel without purpose. The way you sit on a bed and forget what to do next. Then a call came. My daughter, bright and light. Mom, Oliver wants to stay with you for the summer. Oliver. My grandson. 18 now, though I still picture him with sandy feet and endless questions about moonlight and galaxies. He's been quiet since school ended. Thought a change of scenery might help, she added. I didn't hesitate. Something deep inside stirred. Not loudly, not with urgency, but with the persistence of a breeze nudging an unopened window. He arrived on a sun-washed afternoon. June was unusually warm. I waited on the porch as the cab rolled in. When he stepped out, I blinked. Gone was the small boy I remembered. In his place stood someone tall and assured, a casual bag on his shoulder and an easy smile on his lips. Hey, Grandma, he said, climbing the steps. His voice was different now, richer, steady. Oliver, I breathed, pulling him into a hug. You've really changed. He chuckled. You always say that. Because it's always true, I replied, ruffling his hair, a gesture that didn't quite fit anymore. The house shifted with his presence, as if the walls had been holding their breath. I showed him to the guest room, but he moved through the house like he was chasing old shadows, brushing his fingers across framed photos, pausing at the turntable. These still work? He asked, lifting a record. Of course, I said. Good music never ages. That evening we dined beneath the mulberry tree on the patio. Just the two of us. I made his favorite, rosemary chicken with potatoes. He devoured it like he hadn't had home cooking in weeks. We talked about his future, his recent past, and everything in between. As I gathered dishes, I noticed him watching. Not the distracted glance of a bored teen, something heavier. Studious. Wait. What? Asked, amused. He tilted his head. You don't seem like someone who's been through a rough patch. I hesitated, then said, You brought light back with you. This place missed it. He didn't say anything, but his gaze softened. Later we watched an old movie I adored. Halfway through I looked over. He was relaxed, watching both the screen and me with a quiet thoughtfulness that lingered longer than it should. The moment passed, but it stayed with me. In bed that night I felt it, an echo of something awakening, gentle, persistent, like sunlight touching a part of the soul long hidden. And I thought, what an extraordinary thing to find warmth where you least imagined it. Days began to melt into a soft gold. Our mornings stretched into lazy breakfasts on the porch. The light played through the leaves, and Oliver, effortlessly, made everything feel like part of a beautiful slow-motion daydream. He noticed things, quietly, always just enough. I'd go to make tea. He'd already boiled the kettle. I'd lift a heavy box, and his hands were already steadying it, saying, Grandma, are you auditioning for an action flick? His humor always caught me off guard. He'd mimic my voice in grand theatrics. Isabella, don't neglect your vitamins. And that grin, always slightly crooked, would do what nothing else could. Make me laugh, truly laugh. Why do you always make me sound like a retired stage diva? Please. Because that's exactly what you are in my version of reality, he'd say, eyes twinkling as if that answered everything. There were times I found myself quietly observing him, the way his features animated mid-thought, how his hand slid through his hair when he was puzzling something out. I told myself it was only the comfort of company again, the warm ache of being acknowledged. Still, there was something in the way my heart beat faster when he leaned closer to whisper a joke. His voice dipped low, as if the world faded and only the two of us remained. One evening after dinner, he wandered into the hall closet and reappeared with an armful of old board games. "Let's see if you've still got it, champ," he grinned, shaking the dice like a gambler with everything riding on the next roll. "I'm going to wipe the floor with you," I replied, arching an eyebrow. "Oh really?" he teased, eyes gleaming. "That's bold talk from someone who spent 15 minutes searching for her glasses on top of her head." "That was not my finest moment," I muttered, laughing despite myself. We played well past dusk, the golden light of a lamp casting a cozy glow across the table. He made up rules on the fly, sneakily adjusted scores in his favor, and acted utterly scandalized when I called him out. But I let it slide. I hadn't laughed that hard in ages, maybe longer. As we gathered the pieces, his hand landed gently on my arm. "You look radiant when you laugh," he said softly. Froze. Not because it was too much, but because it wasn't. It wasn't flirtation, but it wasn't idle either. His tone held something tender, something that lingered beneath the surface of words. "Thank you," I whispered too quietly. I turned to the dishes, trying to focus on anything but the way my thoughts scattered like petals in the wind. That night, lying in bed, I could still hear the echo of his laughter, still feel the faint pressure of his fingers where they had touched my skin. I stared at the ceiling, wondering what exactly was changing. Didn't feel wrong. It felt unexpected, yes, but gently, undeniably true. I had been alone for so long I had forgotten the feeling of being seen. Not just noticed but truly seen. Of being spoken to with genuine intent. Of being teased in a way that brought closeness, not mockery. The next morning he was already in the hallway when I came out, barefoot, hair tousled, 2 mugs in hand. "Morning sunshine," he said, offering one with a sleepy smile. And right then I knew things were shifting. Not loud, not dramatic, just the hush of spring arriving through an open door. It was his idea. "Let's break out of here," he said one morning over coffee, eyes sparkling with a mischievous glint I hadn't seen in years. "Just us. Let's go somewhere quiet. I know a lakeside spot. No crowds, no noise." I couldn't resist him. Not with that look. That look that made me feel like I could still belong in a moment of whimsy. He prepared everything. I tried to help, but he waved me off. "Relax. Find something breezy to wear," he called out while loading the car. Basket, blanket, and a cooler that clinked gently with hidden glass. The drive was warm and wide. Windows down. Wind tugging at our hair. Music trailing from the speakers like a secret shared only between us. The world slipped by in slow colors and easy silences. When we arrived, the lake lay before us like polished silver, still and welcoming. He spread the blanket under a canopy of leaves, laid out fruit, bread, cheese, and 2 chilled glasses. "For you," he said, pouring the wine with care, handing it to me like it was part of a ritual. "Just enough to turn your cheeks pink." I laughed, but I was already blushing. We spent hours there, talking in lazy circles. His voice like a thread weaving through time. His gaze settled on me with quiet focus. He lay on his side, head resting on his hand, watching me as if I were a story he hadn't quite finished reading. "You know," he said almost to himself, "you've got a figure women my age would envy." I cracked an eye open, smirking. "Oliver, are you attempting to charm your grandmother?" He shrugged, smile soft. "Just speaking truth. You're breathtaking." Something fluttered low in my chest. I looked away, let my gaze fall on the shimmering water, hoping the breeze might cool the warmth rising through me. But he noticed. He always noticed. Not long after he stood, hand extended. "Let's go," he said with a crooked grin. "The water's waiting." "Oliver," I began laughing. "Don't you dare." Too late. We were laughing, tumbling toward the edge, and then we were in. The water enveloped us in liquid silk, cool and playful. I shrieked as he spun me once, twice, like we were dancers gliding on the breath of summer. "You're lighter than you look," he said, still holding me. Felt natural, effortless, like we'd stepped out of time for a while, and the world had agreed to wait. "That's because you're stronger than you look," I teased, catching my breath. But he didn't let go right away. By the time we stumbled back onto dry land, wet and giggling like conspirators, the sun was already dipping low. We wrapped ourselves in the blanket, the last of the wine shared between quiet glances and contented sighs. Silence stretched easily between us, like a well-worn song we both knew by heart. As we packed up, he leaned in close, his voice low. "When we get back, will you make those cookies I love? The ones with the big chocolate chunks?" Smirk. "Only if you promise not to eat all the dough again." He laughed, brushing a lock of damp hair from my forehead. "I can't promise that." Later, the house filled with the sweet scent of sugar and vanilla. He sat at the table, watching me move about the kitchen as if I were painting a memory he didn't want to forget. "I've missed this," he said quietly. I glanced at him. "What part?" "This. Being here. Like this." And in that small moment I understood. We'd stepped into something unspoken. Not wrong. Just new. Gentle. Real. A space where names weren't needed. The cookies cooled on the counter, chocolate glistening as they set. I handed him one, and the way his face lit up reminded me of simpler times. "You still got it," he said through a mouthful, boyish and glowing. "And you're still hopeless when it comes to sweets," I said, ruffling his hair, still tousled from the lake. He didn't even bother to fix it. "Come lie down," he asked a moment later. "Let's put on a movie." "My room?" I asked, surprised by how easy the words felt. "Yeah, feels comfortable there. Like old times." We brewed tea, his suggestion as always thoughtful, and carried our mugs to my bedroom. The light from the lamp was soft and warm, casting golden patches on the walls. We climbed onto the bed, propped against pillows and my faded quilt. He opened the laptop and chose a film. French, romantic, about two people who find each other in a quiet, unexpected chapter of their lives. He watched the screen, but I could feel his gaze drifting now and then. It wasn't intrusive. Felt mindful. I tried to focus on the story, on the delicate way the characters reached for each other's hands. A line from the film stayed with me longer than it should have. She wasn't looking for anything, but he found her where she had forgotten how to be seen. That line settled deep. Midway through, he shifted beside me. "Hey," he said gently. "I think I ate too many cookies. My stomach feels funny." I turned to him. He looked slightly flushed, one hand resting on his middle. "Should I grab something for it?" He offered. He hesitated. "Would you, maybe just rub it a little? Like when I was a kid." It always worked. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. I nodded, sitting up beside him. Without a word, he lifted his shirt, revealing skin still warm from the afternoon sun. I placed my hand over his stomach, moving in slow, familiar circles. He let out a long, soft breath, eyes falling closed. "Still works," he murmured, voice nearly a whisper. We didn't talk after that. The room was quiet except for the movie's muted dialogue, his steady breathing, and the rustle of fabric as I moved my hand in those same comforting motions I had once used when he was small. But something shifted. Perhaps in the stillness. Perhaps in the way his body responded to my touch. Gentle, calm, open. Perhaps in the way his breath slowed, the faint pink across his cheeks. My hand stopped, resting quietly on him. And before I could reason why or how, I leaned forward and kissed him. Just once, lightly, at the center of his stomach. A kiss too brief to mean anything. And yet it meant everything. When I looked up, his eyes were open, watching. Not alarmed, not lost, just there, present, waiting. I began, but nothing came out. He took my hand, pressed it back to his skin, fingers wrapping around mine. His thumb traced the inside of my wrist, slow and sure. Neither of us spoke. But in that breath, between stillness and movement, I knew. We had entered something delicate, something unnamed, something neither of us had expected but both quietly understood. It felt like we'd stepped into a story that had no guide, only intuition, gently sketching itself around us like the final golden light before dusk. My hand stayed where it had rested, fingers gently pressing against the place I had kissed. I could feel his heartbeat there, quiet, sure, slightly quicker than before. And under my touch, something intangible pulsed, a rhythm I couldn't name, only feel. He didn't pull away. He didn't flinch. He just looked at me, gaze calm, yet filled with something unspoken. Trust, maybe. Or that quiet longing that has no voice. Then, in a voice barely above a breath, he said, "Will you keep going?" There was no demand. Only the kind of request that's born from safety, from closeness, from being known. And without thinking, without needing to understand, I nodded. My hand returned to its slow path, gliding gently in circles along the warm curve of his stomach. His breathing deepened again. I focused on the simple motion, soft, steady, caring. I didn't try to name the moment. I didn't want to. I just existed in it with him. But something subtle shifted. His body stiffened just briefly beneath my fingers, then eased. His breaths quickened, then caught midair, as though he was keeping something inside. I didn't need to look to know his hands were gripping the blanket. I could feel the quiet tension ripple through him, then melt just as quickly into stillness. And then he exhaled, long, deliberate, like he had been holding something in for far too long. I hesitated. Unsure. My hand stilled again, the quiet between us thick, dense like the air before a storm. And then he turned. Not urgently, not in confusion, but with intent. He moved toward me like there was nothing else but this room, this breath. And then gently he kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't daring. It was gentle, thoughtful. A moment folded into warmth. His lips brushed mine like a truth long buried but finally spoken. And I, almost without realizing, brought my hand to his face, holding him there, giving back just a little more than I meant to. It wasn't about impulse. It wasn't about thrill. Felt sacred. A quiet understanding passed between us, wordless and profound. When we parted, I kept my eyes shut. I wasn't ready to face the reality. Not yet. But then his fingers found mine. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I opened my eyes slowly, shook my head, and pressed my thumb gently against his knuckles. "Don't," I said softly. "There's no need to apologize." There was so much I wanted to say. Questions, uncertainties, the echoes of what-ifs. But they didn't belong here, not now. Not when he leaned his head on my shoulder like he used to. And I, without hesitation, rested mine against his. We stayed that way. No more dialogue. No need to name what had just happened. The film flickered soundlessly on the screen, forgotten. The cookies untouched beside us. But the warmth between us had changed. No longer just nostalgia or fond memory. Something had opened. Something new. Fragile. Undefined. And even if I didn't know where this would lead, I knew one thing. Something inside me had stirred awake. And in that moment, wrapped in shared stillness, I no longer felt alone.